Okay guys, I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but I have read an Emily Henry book that I might not like as much. It's not that I didn't like it, I just didn't super love it, but also I didn't super love it because it's like not up to her usual standards. Not because it's a bad book, and if it was anyone else, I'm having a crisis, okay? So we're gonna talk about it. But first I'm going to try to do this, in the calm, cool, collected way that maybe I can somehow manage. So I am here today with an ARC review of Emily Henry's new book, Funny Story. Thank you to the publisher and Edelweiss for handing me a ARC of this so that I could read it and review it for you guys. Funny Story is the story of Daphne and Miles. Now, Daphne and Miles are two people who have been thrown together under extremely weird circumstances. At the beginning of the book, it kind of opens with Daphne herself giving you a little bit of backstory on where we are right now. So she was together with and then engaged to a guy named Peter. And they were like so close to getting married that he went out on his bachelor party and he was there with all of his guy friends and his platonic female best friend Petra, who was at the time dating Miles. And during this bachelor party, Petra confessed that even though she and Peter had been friends since grade school and never dated, that now was the moment that she was going to profess her love. And Peter was like, oh my gosh, I think I kind of reciprocate it. And so Peter comes back from his bachelor party, kicks Daphne out of the house that they shared, basically says, I'm leaving for a week with Petra, and like, you just need to get out. And Daphne has nowhere to go. He has moved her to a teeny tiny town that she has never been to before. She's on the West Coast now. She was from the East Coast and she just doesn't know what to do. That's how she becomes roommates with Miles, who now also has space in his apartment because Petra has moved in with Peter. So they are two broken-hearted people who really didn't interact much previously, but are now roommates and stuck with each other. So like I said, this book kind of starts with Daphne giving you backstory on what's happened. Technically, when the book starts, she's already roommates with Miles, but she like has to start back here so that you understand it. It's a single POV book, so we never get Miles's perspective. And one of the things that's like an issue right away is it's really just not clear what kind of a relationship Daphne and Miles have with each other, despite the fact that they were both with their respective exes for 2 to 3 years and therefore always in each other's orbit. I was just really not clear from the beginning exactly how these two thought of each other, and that was kind of weird. Daphne has recently become a children's librarian, which is her dream job and is something that was close to my heart, as I was also a children's librarian. And so she's also like trying to deal with her job and something really major at her job, which is a readathon that she's scheduled, a 24-hour reading bonanza that she wants to get through at her library. And then she says she's gonna leave and go back east where her mom is and just get out of this town. These plans are rudely interrupted when Miles and Daphne are invited to Peter and Petra's wedding, which after this apparent whirlwind romance has been scheduled for a couple of months later. They both decide in a drunken haze to send in their RSVP. And when Peter calls Daphne and says, you really don't have to do this, I don't want you to be alone or feel bad, Daphne makes a small lie, which is that she does have a partner, and the reason that she didn't RSVP with a +1 is because that partner is Miles, who she is now dating, and that becomes a whole big snowball. I will say this is one of the most realistic fake dating schemes that I've ever seen in my life, because for both her and Miles, the lie just kind of snowballs naturally, and they're both just like, oh boy. And there's a lot of people in on it also from the beginning, so it never feels quite weird, and they get mocked for like having started this whole situation. I'm not usually a big fan of that like trope, but A, it's not a really big part of the story. It just kind of happens and sets everything in motion. And also it was just funny. And they're both just like, I hate this, which is great. Basically, the real thing that happens is that Miles and Daphne decide that they need to keep this ruse up until Peter and Petra's wedding. And also Miles is like offended, I guess, that Daphne doesn't like this town, which he has come to love. And so he says that in order to kind of keep up the ruse of their relationship, that he will take her out every Sunday when they both don't have work and show her a bit of the town so that she will also fall in love with it. It's not clear why he takes that on as a point in the beginning, but obviously this leads to them going out on many dates and falling in love over the process. As this is an Emily Henry book, there is an attempt at a number of side stories. One of the things that I really love about Emily Henry's books is that it's never just the couple. Like, there's always something deeper going on and other threads happening. Again, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but this was one where I didn't feel like those threads were handled as well as they could be. So Miles, at one point, like, his sister shows up and you find out that he has some really terrible things that have happened in his family that do verge on descriptions of child abuse. So it's never pictured, but it is described. It's emotional and not physical, but it's there. Daphne also has a very interesting relationship with her father, who really just wasn't there. And it also affects how she sees relationships. And that is more dealt with, I think, because we only get Daphne's point of view. She's able to give us a little bit more nuance to that. Her dad does eventually show up at some point. And it's like a weird brief interlude thing towards the end. And there's also the thing about how Daphne has a really, really hard time making friends, and she tries to and succeeds in befriending someone she works with at the library who was recently divorced and also needs someone to talk to. This book was supposed to be an opposites attract romance, and it definitely is. And I think, again, part of my problem with this romance is that I never really got any kind of deeper connection from Miles and Daphne. And that, again, is just really not normal, I think, in an Emily Henry book. There's usually some deeper connection holding these two characters together or bringing them together. And really their attraction felt way more surface level. Like, they went out on these dates, they found each other attractive, and, you know, it was kind of like they were pushing each other away and like, oh, we can't do this. But I really didn't particularly understand what else about each other kind of drew them together. I think a secondary issue is that the plot just did not flow as well. I really didn't understand why the beginning was a little bit clunky and a little bit weird with like this backstory, front story, backstory, front story situation. And then the integration of these subplots just kind of felt like literally like mini quests that had been inserted and not something that really flowed well into the plot overall. It felt kind of odd. I did really dislike not having Miles's point of view. That's a typical complaint for me of a single POV romance, but sometimes I do read ones where it doesn't feel like a huge loss. But again, because I was searching for that deeper connection between Daphne and Miles, I felt like maybe if I had his point of view, I would have gotten more of that, but I really didn't. I will say that this book does end up in quite an emotional place about Miles and Daphne trying to handle like what happened with their old relationships and basically like learning to accept healthy love and standing up for themselves, and also like kind of just like dealing with their own emotional trauma that makes them feel unlovable or unworthy of love or difficult to love. And so there are some really wonderful like soliloquies about that, but they aren't just that, they're soliloquies. There are these huge blocks of dialogue where either someone is having a revelation or being given a revelation or finally saying that thing to a character. And when the dialogue ends up like that repeatedly that many times, I'm like, okay, I kind of feel like I'm being moralized at. And I'm just like, I shouldn't need this huge block of dialogue to explain this to me. I kind of would have wanted it to have come out in the plot a little bit more. So yeah, it just starts to feel a little bit like preachy and talky and not like it really like, you know, it was a tell, not show situation. I want to make it clear, this book is still a good book. It is an emotional book. It does a decent job at integrating other things outside of the romance that make it more complex. However, it is just not up to my usual Emily Henry standards in a number of ways, as I've articulated: the romance, the plotting, the dialogue and like kind of like the emotionality of it all. And considering that I have given Emily Henry's books like 5 stars, the last 2 of them that I have read, you know, and both of them for different reasons. One was really cute and fun and emotional, and the other one was like a second chance with a deeply emotional vibe. And those had a lot going on, but they just felt smoother and cleaner and deeper. And so as someone who expected a certain level to this book, this one just didn't quite reach there. So if this is going to be your first Emily Henry book, this might be a great place to start, because everything that happens after this will be better, at least in terms of the 2 books that I have read and also reviewed on this blog. However, it is not going to be the first Emily Henry I hand anyone by a long shot, because the other 2 that I've read are just so much better. I mean, this is Emily Henry's, what, 5th, 6th book by this point. So, you know, there's always going to be changes in quality. You can't write an amazing book every single time. But I do feel like this one just felt clunky. And I was just so like weirded out by that almost, because that is not an adjective I would ever assign to an Emily Henry book. So part of my rating, which is going to be somewhere between 3 and 4 stars, probably like higher 3.5 to 4, is just because I felt so weirded out reading this book, just having expected more than I got. So I recognize that that's a bias on me, right? But book ratings are always biased towards the person who is giving them, and all I can do is be honest about it, that maybe if you don't have as deep as an attachment to her books, you won't have this problem. I don't know. If you would like to read this book for yourselves, this book will be out tomorrow. So if you're seeing this review today, not quite, but as of tomorrow, you can request it from your local library or get it from your local bookstore, however it is that you access your books, and see for yourself if it lives up to your expectations. All I can ever do is give you my personal opinion and realize that all readers are different. But again, my ratings for her last 2 books were 5 stars. So if yours were similar, you may have similar feelings. Personally, I'm just proud that I got this book review done. It has been a really, really rough go of it for me these last couple of weeks, and I had decided that I wanted to read the new Emily Henry because of that. I am not thrilled that it gave me these weirded out feelings, but I am thrilled that I'm here to give this review to you, so I at least have some content. Hopefully it won't be quite as long before you see me again. Thanks, guys. Bye.